Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm joined by Mike Hambright. Mike has been a friend of mine for years, and he has an interesting perspective being one of the founders of another marketing company in the real estate investment space that focuses on direct mail called Investor Machine. We talk all about marketing, some of the common pitfalls that he sees across investors, as well as what the data says about what you have to do to succeed. I'll see you there. Mike, how you doing today?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad for you to be here as well. For anybody that might not know you, what you do, what's the backstory?
I started as a male model, and no, that didn't happen.
You didn't have to tell me that. I already knew it was true.
Yeah, you can just tell I've got it in my swagger.
Yes.
Yeah, real estate investor since 2008. What is that, 16 years or so ago? Gosh, it's 17 years. Yeah, I'm getting old here. And before that, I refer to myself as a corporate refugee. So my wife and I left corporate America to jump into real estate in 2008 when everybody else was running away. But it was our circumstance. I had an amazing kind of dream job at the time, and my boss got fired. And so I was the next guy to go just because they were just dismantling. And then went to work for a startup that was flying high and did really well for 18 months. And then that company. And so it was just this realization of, and by the way, that was after going back to grad school to get more of kind of formal education and follow the traditional path, which I was the first person in my family to do. But that was the path I thought was more traditional education, more kind of playing the game, the corporate game, if you will, and the education game. And then only to realize that I need to take my destiny into my own hands. And I've always worked really hard. And up until that point, it was for somebody else. But I had not much control over my compensation or the outcome or whatever, right? And then at that point, we jumped into, my wife was a consultant and investment banker before that. So she actually made a lot more money than I did, but she left to have our son. And this is back in 2000. He was born in 2007. And when I lost my job, I actually left for this company that was about to file bankruptcy, but my son was 2 months old. So we went from like pretty high income couple with no real responsibilities to no income and a 2-month-old baby. And as they say, shit got real fast, right? So at that point, I wanted to put my family's financial future into my own hands, which was the entrepreneurial path. Screwed around for a little while trying a few different things. And I'd always been interested in real estate investing, but had never done anything other than go to some weekend boot camps and things like that. But so 2008, we jumped in with kind of the full force, and failure wasn't an option at that point that we could accept. And we had a little bit of savings, but it was dwindling fast. And so we just jumped in when everybody else was running away. And I didn't really understand that at the time. We were just naive to what was going on. But on some level, that naivete, is that what you said? Actually was to our benefit because we didn't have skeletons in the closet. We didn't have inventory. We weren't upside down on loans and stuff that other people were at that time. And we just ran in full force. And our first year in business, we flipped about 65 houses in Dallas with no prior experience, and went on to do hundreds here, and then started coaching and mentoring and all sorts of other things that have come from that. But that was the beginning of the real estate venture.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm always impressed by entrepreneurs that have a true, like, risky, difficult story. Mine's not that way at all. My secret to entrepreneurship was just really low on opportunity cost. I wasn't leaving like the fantastic job or something like that. So I always respect people like you. Like, I don't know if I would have been able to do it.
Yeah, I can't say that there was methodical, right? Like a lot of times when you've been in business for a long time, for you and me, people look at us and they're like, there's a guy that a friend of mine a while back said, everything you touch turns to gold. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I've touched a lot of turds. I've blown up a lot of stuff. I've wasted tons of money and tons of time on stuff and tried stuff and shut it down. But I guess that's what social media does, is it, not that I'm purposely making everything look better than it is, but you tend to share, or even people just tend to see the highlights and not the lowlights.
Yeah, that's totally true. So today, obviously you started flipping houses. That was the beginning. I know today you're involved in a number of businesses. For anybody wondering what you're up to now, what are those businesses? What do you do?
Yeah, it's evolved from flipping houses in the DFW market to coaching people all over the country to then really finding my real passion is in helping more of the pro level investor. We do coaching for new investors as well, but I love talking with guys like you and people that are in my mastermind. So I run a mastermind called Investor Fuel. That's for professional real estate investors. And we have 150 members or so. Our average member is probably flipping 50 to 75 deals a year. But we have people that are doing 600 or 800 a year, and we have people that are doing 2 a month, and a little bit of everything. But I've found that it's easier to help people go from 2 or 3 deals a month to 2 or 3 deals a week than it is sometimes to get somebody from 0 to 1 deal at all, just because there's so many obstacles and excuses. And I get it. I had those when I started too. And then I also am co-founder of Investor Machine, which we work with you guys on with Jason Lewis, who's in Salt Lake with you, which is a lead gen company. We're really a data company that does direct mail as our primary product. And so predictive modeling of who's most likely to sell their house next. And we do that for investors across the country and have sent probably over 100 million pieces of mail at this point, is my guess.
Yeah, that's wild. It's a lot of mail. And generally, my experience with you is that you're the quiet guy in the back of the room who doesn't say that much. Once in a while, you get on a soapbox. If you get on a soapbox, I have to say, it usually has something to do with lead gen. That seems to be your thing.
Yeah. I think that real estate, what I've realized, like I said, I mentor and I advise a lot of people, and I'm around in a lot of circles with accomplished entrepreneurs, I'll say. And I think that a lot of real estate investors, if you think of like using Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, for those of you that are familiar with it, the upper left, you're an employee, the lower left, which is the next step, you're self-employed. And then from there, you get to the upper right, which is a business owner. So you're still working, but you have employees and systems and processes. And then the lower right is the basically passive income. So you invest in businesses or the stock market or whatever, and you have no role whatsoever. Your money is making money for you. And most so I'll say most that want to be a real estate investor never leave the employee box. So they're too comfortable. And those are what I would say is like the coaching student. They're interested, like I was. Like I went to a RIA club and I went to a boot camp and I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't get my wallet out. I didn't buy, and I made excuses as to why now's not a good time. And then the lower left, that self-employed box, there's a lot of real estate investors and honestly all entrepreneurs that are stuck there. And self-employed means you have a job and you might be the owner of the company, but you're also the main employee that has to do everything. And what I've found is a lot of real estate investors get stuck there, and they might make more money than they did when they were in corporate America, but they're probably working 2 or 3 times harder than they ever did. And they're working on holidays or weekends or whatever. And I get it. I do it too. But it gets to a point to where you do things because you have to, not necessarily because you want to. And I think a lot of it is that folks at that level, we could talk about, you got to have a team to pull yourself out and buy back your time and fill those seats. But none of that can happen. You can't make more money unless you have more leads. You could optimize and stuff like that. But people that are in that box are usually just quite frankly, not doing enough lead gen to make enough money to hire people to take you out of the seats you're sitting in. And real leads are in particular the fuel that allows all that to happen from my perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree. We just did, I think you're familiar with the benchmark report that we've been doing with investors. One of the things we did, and for anybody not familiar with this, what we did is basically just surveyed a whole bunch of real estate investors. The idea being, if you give us some data about your business, then we're going to give you a report showing how your business compares to others. So hopefully you can see where in your business the weak spots are and where the strong spots are. So we gathered a lot of different information from that. And we're actually at the point where we're shipping this week out those responses we have enough data to actually ship out all the comparison graphs and everything. One thing I was just looking at is one of the questions we asked is, what are the top 3 problems you're dealing with in your business? And the number one problem by a long shot across the board was generating leads consistently that are quality, right? And people say this different ways. I don't have enough leads. My leads aren't good enough, whatever. The main thing is the number of qualified leads is either not enough or it's not consistent enough. And it's the biggest problem that at least investors like self-reported feel they're facing.
Yeah.
You can always make a case for maybe that's the symptom. That was a different problem.
The truth is what a lot, and my guess is, I'm sure you didn't ask this question, is if you asked, why is that? The reality is they don't spend enough. Like in my experience, and by the way, I've got a ton of, I'm as connected as anybody in this industry and work with a lot of people. Real estate investors and probably all entrepreneurs are all mostly 98% are just not good at math. They don't understand, hey, if I spend more money, I make more money, right? Or they're so focused on getting a really cheap cost per lead or a really high ROAS if they're calculating ROAS. But you can't put a high ROAS in the bank, return on ad spend. So for every dollar you put in, you and I both agree pretty closely that you should be comfortable. If you could do something at scale, you should be comfortable with a 4x ROAS and sometimes maybe less, right? But people are like, oh, for every dollar I put in, I get back 10. That's awesome. But my next comment is always, why aren't you spending more? If you found a good fishing hole, put 2 lines out, put 3 lines out, keep going, right? Because that's telling you that this is a good place to invest. And said another way, the highest ROAS channel there is at all is for an investor to go out and door knock themselves. But it's not very scalable. And so that's why nobody does that at scale, like certainly themselves as the owner. And the solution is you need to find channels that you can scale up, because nobody wants to have a really high return on ad spend, but not do any volume that allows them to truly be a business owner and not an employee of their own company, right?
Sure. Yeah. I would say that both of those are really important metrics, because obviously if your return on ad spend is like 0.5, doing more of that's not going to fix anything. You're actually going to do
sure.
But it's a good place. Volume. Like, what's more important? Like, you give me $1, I'll give you 10, or you give me $1 million, I'll give you 3 million.
Exactly. That's for sure. Yeah. All of my kind of fine print there is channels that allow you to scale and get a reasonable ROAS and things like, and obviously I'm biased because we own an agency essentially, and just like you. But I think that people should be looking for channels that they can scale. Like you can scale pay-per-click and you can scale mail, especially if you're working with one of us, by sending a message to your account rep and saying, let's go up, instead of I need to go hire 5 more cold callers. And by the way, 3 of them are going to be gone by the end of the week. So let's try to hire 5 a week just to maintain 5 or whatever. It's a grind, right? Not only is the lead quality better on inbound leads, it's scalable if you're working with folks like one of us, because that's what we do. We take that burden off your plate.
Yeah. I was just reading, goodness, I think it's in Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. It's a book by Jim Collins. I don't know if you've read it or not. He teaches
it's in my queue. I've got it. I'm good at buying books. I'm not necessarily good at getting through all of them.
That's one of the most on-brand things you've ever said. So, the visionary entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's so classic. I'm actually in the same boat. And it's...
the thing is that when I'm at events, or obviously even my mastermind, people are like, oh, here's a great book. Or people are constantly recommending stuff. And almost without fail, I'll just go into Amazon. I'm just like ordering stuff. Like I order them faster than I can read them for sure.
Yeah, take action first, put the work in second, right? Like the standard law of visionary entrepreneurship. And I say that in an endearing way because I'm the same way too. Yeah, don't take offense. But he talks about this concept where he says fire bullets, then cannonballs. And the idea is you're out on some, I don't know what analogy, because I'm probably going to butcher it. You guys just go read the book. But imagine you're out on some pirate ship and then this like enemy ship comes. And like, how are you going to deal with that situation? A lot of people would like, there's generally 2 different like paths that people would go into. One kind of entrepreneur would take like, they would pull out the guns and start to fire some bullets and then just start like shooting the enemy ship, right? It's ultimately like not going to do that much, right? But they're just like keep on shooting. The other path that people go to is they throw all the black powder they have into the cannon, and they get 1 cannonball and they try to aim it right at the ship and they just fire, and they're like, we're just gonna destroy the ship with this 1 cannonball. And what happens in the first time? In the first circumstance, you don't make a big impact. What happens in the second circumstance? You waste all your resources right away trying to fix the problem. So what he says is fire bullets, then cannonballs. The idea is you fire the bullet, you don't hit the ship. So then you adjust a little bit. You fire again, you don't hit the ship. You adjust a little bit. You fire again, you hit the ship. When you hear it hit the ship, that's when you know you have to bet big. And you throw all of your black powder in the cannon, you shoot the cannonball, same trajectory, and you hit the ship. And that's how you actually like make sure you're hitting it. It's similar ultimately to marketing, right? Where like, I see people making these big bets. Like we've had clients that we bring on before just trying to spend like a lot of money. And I don't have a problem with someone coming to me saying, I want to spend 50 grand a month. I do have a problem if you have 50 grand in your bank account. That's where this this has to work, and it has to work fast. That's just not a smart place to be in. But also, like to the point that you were just making, some people are just firing those bullets and they're hitting the ship, and you're looking at it, you're like, you have a gold mine here. If you're willing to just put more resources behind it, this could be so much more effective, and it's calibrated. You know exactly what you're doing, and they're just not putting more money out there.
The other problem that I see with a lot of real estate investors is they're really quick to say that I tried something and it didn't work without any consideration for how it was tried. Like they're really quick to say, I hand wrote 50 postcards and direct mail doesn't work. That wouldn't work for anybody. And there's a few beliefs that probably on your side, like people think if they run Google pay-per-click themselves, and there's some people that are good at it, but the average person is not, but they'll think I tried that and it doesn't work, so you can't perform it either. And there's also this general belief in the real estate investing space. And this, I keep saying real estate, let's just say it's probably all entrepreneurs, but that all data is equal. It's like, just because I downloaded people all the time, like, hey, who's got 1 cent skip tracing? Like, who's got the cheapest lists? And it's like, you wouldn't say that about, I'm going to get LASIK surgery. Anybody have a BOGO coupon, buy one, get one, or know who's doing the cheapest LASIK in town? Like, you want the best, and you should really do that for lead gen as well, because let's be honest. You have a big organization. On the Investor Machine side, we have 75 employees. Like we have data scientists, and we have a lot of people that are evolving quickly. Like we try something, test it, learn, and you're just never going to be able to compete with an agency or somebody that operates at that level, because we've climbed the learning curve way further up than you have here, right? And but my point in saying that is there's a lot of real estate investors that are quick to say, I tried something and it didn't work. And it's, did you put enough money into it to really try it? Like I spent $2,000, and so your average profit in your market is 50 grand. So that would imply a 20x ROAS. If it did work, you didn't spend enough for it to work, right? Back to you shooting bullets that aren't even going to connect. But they're really quick to say, I tried it and it never worked. And then what happens is you start to give up on, how many channels are there? Marketing channels is really only maybe a handful at best of meaningful channels. And if you're listening to this and that resonates with you and you've tried something and it didn't work, I would encourage you to add a couple words to say, I tried it and it didn't work the way that we did it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work. And we see it all the time. And I'm sure you do. You've got clients in the same market. Like we're doing advertising for both of them, and one of them is crushing it and one of them is not. And we're like, it ain't us. Like it's something else, right? And we're not looking to shift blame because we want everybody to be successful. But when you realize that things like that, you're like, okay, there's something else going on in the sales pipeline or in the funnel or whatever that is causing these two nearly identical samples, all else equal. It's not really a marketing issue. It's probably a sales issue.
Sure. Yeah. An extension, another example of kind of what you're saying. I honestly think the problem is not that I'm agreeing with you, but it sounds like I'm disagreeing. But I don't think the problem is that people like try it and then assume it doesn't work too quick. I think they just draw conclusions too quick, period. Yeah. I'm sure you've seen it also go the other way. Now, as service providers, we can only get so upset at someone when after a week of our service, they're like, I got 2 deals. This is the best thing in the entire world. Like when I hear that, I literally had this circumstance where I had a person from my account executive team at an event. He comes back from the event with this good news. He's like, yeah, good news. We have this client. They just started a week ago. They've got 3 deals locked up. They're telling everybody at the mastermind. They're so excited. And that's good news. And I was like, did you tell them to shut up? And he was like, he felt like I was like the Debbie Downer because he was like all excited. And I was like, that's bad news. What about all those people that are going to hear that and they're going to think this is how it works? Because it's not how it works usually. Right. I'm sure you could build like a list of examples of times that that's with investor machine funds. I could do the same.
I said it before with coaching too, is like one of the worst things that can happen is somebody gets their first deal way too easy, because then that's their expectation, right? Is, oh, this isn't that hard. But it's almost like people say you should never tell your kids how smart they are. You should tell them how hard they're working. Like you're a really good worker, because you want to instill being willing to work hard, not that things should just come to you easy because you're just naturally smart. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know what you could call it. One day I had this question in my mind. I was like, how much money do you have to spend on a marketing channel to know if it works or not? That was the question. So I hired a data scientist, like literally for this specific purpose. And we decided like, we're going to model this out. We're going to try to figure this out. So you have to have like certain constraints, right? So what we did is we built this simulation model. I'm sorry if this is going to get like way too theoretical, but it's interesting. It's an interesting outcome, I promise. We built a simulation model where we had 1,000 companies running a marketing channel. And you could think of it like I could say, what's the chance I'm going to get heads versus tails from that coin? It's probably 50% heads, 50% tails. But then you could just sit there and flip the coin and see what happens. It's not going to be like perfectly equal heads and tails, or it's just going to be whatever it is. And then the more data you have, the more that's going to approach that level where it's consistent. So what we did is we took these 1,000 companies and we gave them all $10,000 of marketing spend. And every dollar that was spent had some percentage likelihood of getting them a deal, which had a percentage likelihood of getting them a certain amount of money. And everything was targeted towards 5x. So just like you have a coin, when you flip the coin, you got a 50% chance for heads. This was like targeted towards a 5x return. And what we wanted to know is if they all spent $10,000, how many of those 1,000 companies would get at least a 4x return, right? So they're targeted towards 5x. We just want to measure that they're at least at 4, right? So there's going to be this bell curve centered around 5. We want 90% of the bell curve to be above 4. How much data is that going to take? It wasn't 10,000. It wasn't 20,000. We ended up finally getting there to where 900 of the 1,000 companies had at least a 4x return, even though they were all targeted to the exactly same return at $144,000 in ad spend with average parameters from this industry, which I thought was super fascinating.
That's specific for real estate investing?
Specific for real estate investing, assuming a $20,000 deal spread. That's one of the big things. Because like if you have $1 million deal spreads and you're targeted towards a 5x return, you're at like a $200,000 cost per deal versus. So the bigger your deals, the more data you need. But if we took 20,000 as a benchmark, which the average right now is 22,375 or 373, right? If you took like 20,000 as the benchmark, it was $144,000 that you had to spend on the marketing channel, assuming it's targeted towards a 5x return, assuming it's getting that long-term for you to just prove that you had at least a 4x.
Yeah. And most people don't play the game that long. So I'm an example of that too. Like I operate in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and historically I would focus way more on the Dallas side of town. It's 8 million people. There's a big market. And so there was a time where this has evolved over the years, but there was a time where I was putting money into the Fort Worth market. Tarrant County is where Fort Worth is. So I kept putting money into there, and I looked back after, I think it was like 4 or 5 months, and I just wasn't getting a positive return. Like it was just like sucking wind, right? So we're like, all right, shut it off. This is direct mail, by the way. So shut it off. I'm not going to advertise there anymore. Let's move that money over to the Dallas side. The next month, I got my 2 most profitable deals I'd ever gotten in history on the Fort Worth side. And I just didn't play the game long enough. And the stories you're telling and the stories that I'm telling here, these are from personal experiences of, oh my God, we never should have stopped advertising, turn it back on. And it's just like we had to play the game long enough. And I think we've seen this even in Investor Machine. There's people that are operating for a while and they're just like, hey, I'm not really getting the type of return I want. And they maybe stop advertising. And then the next month or 2 months later, they're like, hey, I just got 3 super profitable deals. Can I start back up again? And we're like, you got to keep playing the game long enough to see those wins, right?
Yeah, the game's in your favor. Here's the crazy thing. Like you take this example I gave of 140,000. That's assuming your cash conversion cycle's 0 days, which we know it's not, right? Because I bet you those deals you got in Fort Worth were from postcards that you had sent prior to stopping, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So you have the delay of results. And then you also have the fact that you're going to pivot. And here's what happens to marketers. I see this literally with like my team. I see this with my clients. Like you start out as a marketer, you don't know anything. And you're like, I don't know anything. I don't know what's going to work. Then you do something that starts to work. And this is when you get really dangerous because you have confidence and it's actually founded in nothing because you like did something successfully. So when people say, oh, I know you're like, this is how I know when I'm talking to like marketers that I'm interviewing that aren't great marketers. They're like, oh yeah, I've managed tons of spend in these platforms. I know how it works. Like I know how to get results. Because after that point is the point where you realize that results are an ever-changing target. And you realize that like maybe I had success doing that thing once, but I tried it 10 more times and it only worked 7 of those times. Because that's the constant game that is like marketing. So the best marketers actually have then less confidence than those marketers in the middle, because they've played the game long enough to realize that the rules of the game that they thought were there when they were like intermediate aren't actually there. And they really don't control the outcomes on the level that they thought they did. And the reason I'm saying that is because then those best marketers, they understand the way I'm going to win is not because I know what's best. It's going to be because I am willing to test and I am willing to gather data. And every single dollar you spend on marketing has two purposes. Number one, generate results. Number two, generate data that helps you get better results tomorrow. Right. So they have that mindset, which then is the mindset, instead of I'm going to spend $144,000 to see if this channel works, it becomes the mindset of we're going to spend our first $144,000, get some data, pivot, and then we're going to spend the next, and then we're going to get some data, we're going to pivot, and then we're going to deal with cash conversion cycles. And you roll it out, and you're looking at, I'm $1 million into this marketing channel, and for 99% of real estate investors, it's not even possible. And that, I think, is the role of businesses like yours and the role of businesses like mine, because we've already spent that money, we're already doing that testing, and we don't know everything. But the sad reality is, in this industry, you simply cannot, for the average investor, spend enough to really make meaningful insights from your marketing spend, unless you're pooling your data with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. I agree with that.
Sorry, I know it was a mini soapbox.
No, I agree. We do things like or not during COVID, but during this last downturn at Investor Machine, we started using our own numbers that pass through to our members. But we listen to all the calls. We listen to every lead that we generate for all of our customers, thousands and tens of thousands of leads that are popping through. And we're not only getting insights for, was a lead generated? Was there a positive outcome, which we define as an appointment was set, or there was motivation in the voice, and we score the intake on 15 different things. Is your person doing a good job of lead intake? And did they try to set an appointment? Are they over screening or under screening? Like all these things, right? And so it allowed us to get deeper in the funnel to see operationally, there's just a lot of real estate. I was on a podcast earlier today, and I was talking to somebody outside of real estate of just like how many small businesses are really terrible at lead intake and follow-up. And I'm convinced like every real estate investor, every entrepreneur could double or triple their profit in their business by just getting a lot better. And when I say a lot better, I mean from like absolutely terrible to like what you would expect like a normal business should do is answer the phones live and follow up on people that said they want to work with you. And there's mostly small businesses in America are so bad, I don't know about other countries, so bad that you could double or triple your profit just by improving your lead intake and follow-up.
Yeah.
Without spending another dollar on marketing, by the way.
Yeah, it's well. One of my favorite quotes is from Alex Hormozy. He says, advanced companies are advanced because they never don't do the basics.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're talking about. Like,
yeah.
Answer the phone. It's not ultimately that complicated, but the thing is, it's hard to execute consistently on that level. And yeah, Jason, your partner, is actually somebody I look up to on that level.
Yeah.
He's been able to dial it in.
I was just talking to somebody else last week about this, and they said the problem with a lot of real estate investors, and by the way, we're like across my companies, we probably have between 75 and 100 virtual assistants. So we're really big on overseas, especially administrative type roles. But a lot of real estate investors will spend a lot of their treasure on lead gen, but they'll relegate either lead intake or follow up to the $4 or $5 an hour person. And that is your greatest asset. What would it look like if you hired somebody? And it's not that they're incapable. It's that by the way, a lot of real estate investors and entrepreneurs, when you hire a virtual assistant, you somehow think they're superhuman and they don't need to be trained. So just like, here, just follow this Dropbox and try to find this script and then say what it says on the script. We just tend to like go figure it out. And we're entrepreneurs. We go figure stuff out. But your entry-level admin isn't going to figure anything out. Not to the level that you would expect, right? But we're just lazy, and we're just like, go figure it out to somebody that doesn't even understand our culture as clearly as you do. And then by the way, ultimately to come back and say, hey, that marketing channel is not working. It's like, why would it? You took a Ferrari and you filled the trunk with manure. Like, why would it? It's not a pickup truck. It's a Ferrari, right?
Yeah. Another way to speak to the same point you're making is you could, if you were to like segment out how many dollars per hour every potential task you could do in the business is, like communicating with the IRS on behalf of the business, approving the wire transfer, talking to a new lead once it comes in, closing a deal, dispositions. You could lay all that out and order it by most valuable per hour of activity to least value per hour activity, I can almost guarantee you those initial calls with warm leads that just came from your marketing, where you make the first impression with the seller and they emotionally decide if they're going to work with you or not, would probably be one of the highest dollar per hour like value activities in the entire business.
Yeah.
So many real estate investing businesses literally pay their janitor more money than if they had a janitor, right?
Right.
Here, pay their janitor more money than they would the person who's answering that phone, which
Yeah.
is wild. If you think about it from that standpoint, like it's
Yeah.
so valuable. Like I'm
That-
one of those big believers that like you could walk out of the appointment with a contract a week after that lead comes in, but that's not when you won the contract. So often, like when the company won the contract was when the seller made the emotional decision that they feel like this is the company they want to go with. And that can happen in the first 60 seconds of their first phone call, which
Yeah,
is
for
wild.
sure. It could happen in the first 5 seconds because most are not answering it live. So you're losing it when you lost it when the phone rang and you didn't answer, or somebody didn't answer, or a lead pops in from online. As if you don't get back to them like instantly and treat it like the phone's ringing, then there's no way you're going to win.
Yeah. So we could talk all day about
Yeah.
mindset issues that exist, including in you and I around marketing, because just because we could preach it doesn't mean we're perfect at it in our own businesses. I'm sure that's true for you as
No,
well.
for sure. For sure. Yeah. I often say, do as I say, not as I do. So
Yes, exactly. So let me try to close with this. One last question for you. So if you were to take some of what we're talking about and turn it into something actionable that you feel most investors could be doing that they are not doing, that you feel is the biggest missed opportunity, what would you say that most people need to do?
I did say earlier that I think people generally need to spend more on, most people are not spending enough to hit their goals. Like they'll come up with unrealistic goals. They want to make $1 million a year and I'm going to test it, which they don't, most real estate investors, and I'm not trying to knock anybody here. It's not your job to be like an engineer, right? But don't know how to do a test. It's not like super biased. But I think the most important thing, honestly, is just to track some basic KPIs around your business, because we get this kind of gut feel. And for a lot of us, that helps in certain parts of our business, but it doesn't help with reviewing facts. Like your gut has no role in the facts. So how much did you spend? How many leads came in? And for example, there's very few people that are tracking how many new leads came in that we responded within 1 minute. Or so you either answered the phone live or you called them back within a minute. Like not many people are really tracking when did that lead come in. They're just tracking, did a lead come in, right? So if you change to live answering, whether it's inbound calls or a response time, like when a lead came in from pay-per-click, for example, or SEO, like how long did it take you to get to them? And you set that and said it has to be real time with phone calls or under 1 minute with inbound, like email type leads. And track those kind of key metrics. Really track your ROAS, or return on ad spend. Like for every dollar I put in, how many dollars do I get back? And the reason I say cost per lead and cost per contract aren't as important is because it doesn't consider the profitability on those deals. So for said another way, like cold calling and texting, although under a tremendous amount of pressure right now, has the cheapest cost per lead. But we all know that the profit on deals that are from inbound leads, pay-per-click, SEO, direct mail, are typically 200 to 300% higher, right? So you can't just look at cost per contract or cost per lead, because those numbers, I'm not saying you shouldn't track them, but they're not indicative of the profitability on those deals, right? And I think the other thing is in this tracking component is making sure that you're testing stuff over a long enough period to really understand if it's working or not. I know you indicated there was no kind of, I've said something similar to what you said in the past. You should never go into a channel unless you're willing to spend enough on it to get a deal a month and add like a 4x ROAS. So let's just say if you make $20,000 per deal on a deal, you should be willing to spend 5 at least to make 20, and that you can spend that amount for 6 months without quitting that channel. So you should be willing to invest for 6 months at $5K a month in that example of your average deal profit is 20, and make sure that you're not making a decision too early that it's not working or it is working. And very few real estate investors do that. They try something for a month or two, it didn't work, and they move on to the next thing. But then the problem is as a real estate investor, you either rule out a channel that could make you rich, by the way, because it quote didn't work, but you didn't really test it right or give it enough time. And two, it starts to make you feel like this is a hard business to scale. So I need to lower my goals and settle for less because I can make good money doing this and I've got control over my life, but not as much money as I once thought I could because I tried a bunch of stuff that didn't work, but it wasn't a valid test.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I think everything you said is incredible to apply. One piece of one thing I want to connect to though is I think that those things that you described work better together than they do alone.
Yeah.
Because I've seen, like, through my experience working with our clients, that they tend to fall on one side or on the other. The one side is, yeah, I know it's going to take time. It's going to take 6 months. So let me just do it. And then I'll check in 6 months later and we'll just see where we're at. And they're patient. What happens is things go off the rails while they're not paying attention. Like, what happens when 6 months later, like, the channel didn't work, but the whole time you've been taking 10 minutes to get to new leads instead of like less than 60 seconds like you should. And then the other side is the impatient model where this has to work fast. You know what? Every single lead, like, I'm making sure we get to it fast. But like after 2 weeks of like feeling like the leads aren't good, then I'm ready to quit on this. And one of my favorite, sorry, I don't even listen to that much Alex Hormozy stuff, but I guess everything I've ever learned from him is going to come out. So he says macro patience, micro impatience, which is like a hard thing to execute on, but it's that idea of every day I'm tracking religiously, like, all these small things that make sure that we're doing the right things. We're hitting the right leading metrics to get this channel to work. But on a macro level, I'm patient and I'm willing to just grind on that every day for 6 months. And then at the end of 6 months, to zoom out and see what I accomplished from a macro level standpoint. I honestly think that's what people need. And you take like one of those skills without the other one, and it can so easily go off the rails.
Yeah. One thing I'll add is that for a lot of people listening to this, if you're the entrepreneur, if you're the owner of the company, which is going to be a lot of you that are listening, if you know that you're not good at creating the reporting, what happens is we just don't delegate it. So you're like, when we started using, many years back, we started using EOS in our business. And one of the biggest realizations for me was like, if I, as the owner, have to create the reporting prior to the meeting, we're in trouble. And so I'm like, as the owner, I need to show up and have reporting handed to me. And so back to having virtual assistants or virtual staff, or it could be anybody, but once you define how to get these metrics, have somebody else do it, to the point to where in my businesses now, I get reports at some are in the evening, end of day reports, and some are in the morning. Like, first thing that happened, like, here's where we are month to date with these things. Is if you're not good at pulling this information together, like clockwork, and you don't have a lot of us are using different systems. So it's hard to have a CRM that just spits out this beautiful report, because a lot of times our information's in different products, or it has a bunch of asterisks next to it as to like why it's not accurate. But even if you have to have a human do it, like as the owner, you need a dashboard and you need visibility to know exactly what's going on in your business real time every single day for the day, the previous day, and year to date or month to date or whatever it is, of exactly what's going on. So push that on somebody else that is probably more detail oriented than the average person listening to this show right now, and let them figure that out. And that's how you become an owner, is somebody else is handing you the dashboard and you can make decisions from that.
Yeah. Fantastic, Mike. Thank you for taking some of your time to have this conversation today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for anybody interested in learning more, connecting with you or with Investor Fuel or with Investor Machine, or who knows what else you're doing, and what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
You can connect with me on Facebook. I'm active on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can learn more at investorfuel.com about the mastermind and some of the cool things about the mastermind. There's a lot of masterminds out there, and there's very few that have the kind of culture that we have. In fact, I would say one, us, that has an amazing culture. But the reality is we've evolved to where not only do we have this amazing culture, but we try to save our members, or in some instances rev share and pay our members more than they're paying us. So we're in an evolution over the past couple of years here. Is we're trying to have tangible benefits that far outweigh, what you pay to be a member of the mastermind. So therefore, it's costing you more money to not be a member. But we have an amazing community of people that are doing business and doing life together. And you can learn more at investorfuel.com. And then Investor Machine is our lead gen company. We're really a data company that does cutting edge, done for you direct mail. And we're testing stuff, as Brandon talked about, across hundreds of members. And so we know exactly what's working. We know fonts and colors and exactly what is working, because we're tracking that across hundreds of investors nationwide. And so You learn more about that at investormachine.com.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. And for
Yeah,
everybody
great to
else.
see you, buddy. Thank you.
Yep, of course. For anybody else listening, I'll see you next week.